So, coming to the ultra feminist analysis of Carrie. So, if we're looking at Carrie from a commentary on what a young woman who's just, coming into puberty, looking at getting out of childhood, turning into a young woman, and looking at her options in 1970s America. And you can sort of see three different outcomes. And I think that's like personified by Carrie, the characters of Carrie, Sue Snell, and Chris Hargens. I think that's Chris's surname, and I probably pronounced it wrong. So we look at Carrie as being like the conservative Christian take on what life is offering a young woman. Very crazy, nutter Christianity, which I don't know, America's got a flavor for that. You look at Chris as this rampant, sexually liberated young woman who, she's on the pill, she can sleep around. She's also from a rich background, so she has options. The abortion law, I think, came into practice in the 70s. So she had money if she needed to get an abortion, but I think it became legal in the 70s in America to get abortion. So she was like representing the sexually liberated wild child womanhood. And then you've got Sue Snell, who is your girl next door. Um, I think it's implied that her and Goldilocks, I changed his name again. Curly Tops. It's implied that they're intimate, but she's definitely different to Chris, and she's definitely not Carrie. She's popular, but she's not the mean girl. She's the nice girl. She's the girl next door. She's studying. She's got a good home life. She's quite stable. So she's almost like the middle ground between the extreme of Carrie, who her mum is definitely not letting her date, definitely not letting her socialize. Her mum's like anti-sex, very religious, very controlling, very extreme in their religious views. And then you've got full-on sexually liberated Chris, who's dating the bad boys, very powerful in her own way. Like, she's a mean girl at school. She uses her sexuality to get what she wants, with the John Travolta character, but has probably used her sexuality in other ways. But she's also, because she's well off, she has power because of her wealth. And then, you've got Sue Snell as the normal, everyday girl next door type thing. So looking at those three types of early womanhood and the options she has to her available in 1970s America, you can also compare them to the older women that feature in the movie. You've got Carrie's mother, again representing the conservative Christian woman who's very modest, very controlling, very old-fashioned about men and women and their role. She's anti-sex, which is very extreme. I don't know how you repopulate the earth if you're not meant to have sex, but okay. You've got the up-and-coming sexually liberated career woman in the gym teacher, She's got a career, she's a gym teacher, she's very fit, she's beautiful, but she also seems to be, like, liberated and also responsible. Like, she's the go woman of the 1970s. She's got a job, she's got a career, she's aware of her sexuality, but she's making healthy choices and, breaking that glass roof. And then I didn't touch on it in my review, but of the plot, you've also got Sue Snell's mother. Sorry, I'm going to say that again. You also have Sue's mum in the movie. I didn't talk about her a lot in the plot. She does pop up a few times in the movie. So Sue's mum is a traditional housewife. There's a scene where Sue and Carrie's mum interact, and Sue's mum is progressive. She thinks teenagers are going to do what teenagers do. She says Sue is a good girl, which, she knows that Sue and Tommy are together. Again, it's implied that probably Sue and Tommy, Goldilocks, I can't remember how many nicknames I've given him. I hope Tommy is his real name. Um, Sue and Tommy are probably sexually active, but Mum is aware of it and she knows that Sue's a good girl. She doesn't do what other girls do. And also Sue's mum is drinking early in the day. So Sue's mum is a housewife, but she's also a bit progressive and she's not like traditional conservative nutcase like Carrie's mum. So we've got a bit of a triangle happening with the main female role models in the movie. You've got crazy crazy conservative nutcase mum, Carrie's mum, which matches to Carrie. You've got liberated career woman, gym teacher, which sort of matches to Chrissy being a sexually liberated teen woman. And then you've got Sue, who's just your everyday girl next door type, whose mum is also a traditional housewife, but who's also somewhat progressive. She's drinking during the day. She's aware her daughter has a boyfriend and they're probably doing more than just homework, but she's okay with it because they're teenagers and she's got a close relationship with her daughter. What I find really interesting from an ultra feminist point of view is that with those choices in front of a young woman in the 70s, it's like the 1970s, the way of conservative Christianity is out. Things are changing. Women's lib is is up and coming. Being a crazy fundamentalist Christian who's anti-sex, and there's a really interesting scene. That's when Carrie's mum meets Sue's mum, and you can see the conflict in values. So Carrie ends up killing her mum by the end of the movie. Crazy Christian fundamentalist is gone. It's dead by the end of the movie. So that's not a road that is an option for young women in the 70s. At the same time, though, the gym teacher, even though she has a lot of heart and she's trying to encourage Carrie to be more empowered and to look at herself as a beautiful young woman, and the gym teacher has a career and she punishes the mean girls for how they treat Carrie. She's a good character, but she also ends up dead by the end of the movie. Carrie kills her too. So it's like women's liberation isn't a trustworthy path for the up and coming young woman. You look at Chris, who's sexually liberated and powerful, and she seems to get away with everything. She's able to manipulate the John Travolta character, and she doesn't get really punished for being a bully or a mean girl. She sets up the blood bucket to fall on Carrie and Tommy. She's really nasty, and in a way it's almost like this wild young woman full of sexual freedom is winning, but she also ends up dead by the end of the movie. So our options for the young woman coming up into womanhood, the doors are closing. This leaves Sue Snell, who is the nice girl that lives next door. She's not an extremely liberated sexually young woman. She's not sleeping around. She's not mean. She's taking a middle ground as a young woman. She's got morals. We see that because she's trying to be nice to Carrie, but she ends up crazy at the end of the movie. She ends up, she's been in the psychiatric hospital. She's allowed home. Her mum, who is also a traditional housewife but seems to be progressive in her views and the way she's nurturing Sue. Her mum's taking care of her, but the way it's implied, which is really common in the 1970s movies, it's implied that Sue is going to be traumatized by the events in her small town and probably never going to recover. It's like she's trapped in this nightmare of trauma and is never going to get on top of her feet, which was a really, again, I think it's lazy writing or a quick ending. The house gets destroyed, and the victims of whatever happened at the end of the movie, if they survive, they're always tinged by the events and live with the trauma and end up mentally unwell for the rest of their lives. It is the 1970s, and admittedly, mental health standards were pretty bleak. I think they still had institutionalism. They still institutionalized people back then. If you were mentally unwell, or if you had mental health issues, it was pretty common to be taken to an institution and possibly live the rest of your life in an institution. Given that, looking from the 1970s, if you had trauma and were well off or middle class, maybe you would be mentally ill or in an institution or in and out if you had family who took care of you. Maybe that was the bleak outcome, which is what we see with Sue Snell. And maybe that's why Carrie ends with Sue freaking out in bed from her ongoing nightmares of what happened to with Carrie and her friends and stuff. You know, it's the mother is still looking after her. But it's a pretty horrible outcome because Sue is looks like she's going to be forever traumatized. I think the fact that those are the only outcomes for a woman, a young woman in the 1970s, um, in a horror movie, if we look at horror movies critiquing society, it's pretty bleak. Um, but I think it's what makes horror such an interesting genre, and Carrie in particular such an amazing film. I would love to say, in reality, with how mental health has progressed, I would love to say that Sue, even though there wasn't a lot of trauma support in the 1970s, given her family look like they're middle class, they're not heaps wealthy like Chris, the fact that she survived such a horrible situation, I think she would have got counseling and trauma therapy at some point, and she's like 18 or 19 at the end of the film, so hopefully she got some good counseling and therapy and maybe moved away for college and had a really good life. Like, I don't think she's going to be stuck at her mum's house being a traumatized vegetable for the rest of her life. I know for me, with my mental health stuff when I was younger, like when I was in my like early 20s, um, the whole mental health system was not very helpful at the time. But later I was able to get really good counseling, and then specifically, like in the last 15 years, when I've been able to get specific, which is hard for me to say, trauma focused care and treatment, that's made a huge difference to my recovery. So yeah, better outcomes available for mental health people now than in the 1970s. Anyway, that's been my ultra feminist review of Carrie. Hasta la victoria siempre. I hope you enjoyed that. I'll see you soon.